Fintech is financial technologies for short. And there are various examples. It's the way in which the financial technology actually enable how you pay, how you save, how you invest, how you access credit. And those would be just a few examples of what fintech can do. What we are trying to do with, it's not yet an established field in the sense that I came from electronic payment systems law, and you could also at that time have electronic banking law, and it's now moved into something much bigger because of the evolution of fintech through, in fact, four phases. And what we're trying to achieve here is to ensure that the law would be certain, that the law would be enforceable, but that the law would actually support what the appropriate regulation would be. So if I can give an example, so if a regulator such as the South African Reserve Bank decides that in order to, when they weigh up the risks, that we will have to regulate a certain product in a certain way. For example, if they're now looking at central bank digital currencies, if that comes one day as a retail and electronic equivalent of cash for us, then there's a certain way in which they must look at the risks, weigh them up, try and balance those competing interests, and this is the way they would like to regulate. And the way, if it's a rule-based regulation, the way in which you then do it is by either having amending your existing pieces of legislation, so there's primary legislation, or you have delegated legislation. And that can be in the form of joint standards or standards, it can be in the form of directives, can be in the form of rules, depending on the regulator. Oh, there's lots of examples. I think the COVID-19 actually brought quite a few good ones that one can talk about. Remember, we had the social distancing in COVID-19. That meant that we couldn't go into banks, and what we've seen is a shift in various services. One is near field communication technologies, which is basically a lot of people tap these days. Either your card you tap, or you tap your virtual card, you hold your phone there and you can tap. And another example would be that a lot of people then, instead of sitting in the bank and being social distanced, went onto the banking apps and started doing the insurance, your payments, trying to get credit online. So a lot of those kind of things then could be facilitated via an app, including sending a voucher for someone and sending money home, which is your remittances. I think the possibilities are actually endless. But if I just look at it from the payments perspective, I think this is an underutilized area. Our digital roadmap for South Africa that the South African Reserve Bank issued indicated that cash is still king in South Africa. 58% of all payments is cash. And the reason, even though there might be a variety of other forms of payment, and I can give you at least two examples of how we can actually improve on in that area, especially for spaza shops and your Barbie, and also your taxis, etc. And the reason for that is if you don't have the financial consumer trust and confidence, then it's very difficult to get people to look at other ways that fintech can provide instead of cash. So wouldn't it be nice if you're in a township and you can just get into the taxi and just tap and not have to worry about, being unsafe and carrying cash on you? And that's just one example. Tap is not the only one. And of course, when you are fintech yourself, and this is the exciting part in South Africa also, there's a lot of fintechs that are coming through with interesting products, which is totally different from your traditional products. And those fintechs can even be in the township. Look, depending on the kind of fintech that you are using, the risk would vary. There are some that actually the benefits are things such as financial inclusion and especially also digital financial inclusion. But they also, especially in our country, you need to be very careful as a consumer that you use a trusted fintech product. Because of the consumer confidence and trust, but also the risk is that you might, if you don't, for example, put on item limits for your tapping, someone can take your card and they can just go and merrily tap away. But your identity can also be stolen, depending on what you access. And if you don't look at the security, there could be hacking, if it's not a trusted. And fintech can even, depending on the who is using the fintech, can also be a vehicle for money laundering and terrorism financing and proliferation, which is weapons of mass destruction. If we're talking about bigger amounts, not the smaller consumer amounts that I mentioned. For me, from a consumer protection perspective, is our low level of digital and financial literacy. And I think this is actually an opportunity that a university such as ours, especially us focusing and specializing in fintech law and regulation, we will be playing a role in that space. So what we've done, for example, after the Consumer Protection Act was promulgated, and I was responsible for that, was to have a little guidebook that would, in a very simple way, explain all the rights that you have in terms of the Consumer Protection Act. Similarly, one could then do things to understand how the financial system operates. Even from a business perspective, if you want to start a business, if you're a small business, how do you go about setting that up? But there are also other things such as how do you read your own finances? And those are also connected to how digitally literate you are, because you don't necessarily have to do it. You can do it on your phone as well, depending on what kind of product you are using. And especially if you say you're using a robo-advisory service. Now you're sitting and talking to a chatbot, which can be very frustrating. If you have a higher level of digital literacy and digital financial literacy, then you are able to, in most cases, depending on how the chatbot is configured, to actually do things such as even due insurance and other kind of credit applications, etc., online or on your phone for that matter.